The all is mind, the universe is mental. With these simple yet profoundly mysterious words, the Kybalion begins its teaching on the principle of mentalism, the cornerstone of Hermetic philosophy. According to this principle, everything that exists, seen and unseen, material and immaterial, is a product of a grand universal consciousness. The universe, rather than being a vast machine of random matter, is in fact an idea in the mind of the all, the infinite, the divine. This principle is not merely a metaphorical way of describing reality. It is a metaphysical proposition that asserts that mind is the primary substance of the cosmos. Long before the advent of quantum physics and psychological introspection, Hermetic thinkers proposed that consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain or a quirk of evolution, but the essential fabric from which all things emerge. Hermeticism, the spiritual and philosophical tradition from which the principle of mentalism arises, is rooted in the ancient teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, a syncretic figure said to be a fusion of the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek god Hermes. These teachings were recorded in texts such as the Corpus Hermeticum, and later in the Kybalion, a 1908 compilation of Hermetic wisdom by 3 anonymous initiates. Central to this body of knowledge is the idea that the universe is not external to us, not a cold and indifferent expanse, but something deeply interwoven with our own consciousness. According to Hermetic thought, to understand the mind is to understand the universe, to control one's thoughts is to influence reality itself. In this way, mentalism is not only a cosmological proposition, it is a method of personal empowerment and a path towards spiritual enlightenment. When we examine the world through the lens of mentalism, reality becomes more fluid, more malleable, more responsive to the creative power of thought. Our inner world becomes the primary theater of action, and our mental states become the architects of our experience. The ancient Hermetists believed that the universe is a grand mental construct in the mind of the all, what one might call God, the absolute or the infinite living mind. Just as a dream appears real to the dreamer, yet is entirely a product of the mind, so too is the physical world an emanation of divine thought. While this idea might sound abstract or esoteric, it has far-reaching implications, especially in the modern age where the boundaries between mind and matter are increasingly blurred by advances in science, especially in physics, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics, has given renewed credibility to the ancient intuition that consciousness plays a role in shaping reality. The observer effect, for example, reveals that the outcome of a quantum event can be influenced by the act of observation itself. Particles behave differently depending on whether they are being measured. This strange but empirically verified phenomenon suggests that the mind is not separate from the fabric of reality but is somehow entangled with it. In this context, the principle of mentalism no longer appears to be mere metaphysical poetry. It resonates with the findings of cutting-edge science. What Hermeticism calls the all may be akin to the unified field of consciousness, or the zero-point field, that physicists theorize as the underlying substratum of all matter and energy. In psychology and cognitive science, the principle of mentalism finds resonance in the way perception shapes experience. The brain, as neuroscience has shown, does not simply receive information from the outside world, it actively constructs reality. Visual illusions, hallucinations, and the placebo effect all demonstrate the power of the mind to alter what we take to be objective truth. From this perspective, what we call reality is already a mental phenomenon. The external world is mediated through our senses and interpreted by our minds, making the world we know a product of thought. The modern emphasis on cognitive behavioral therapy is itself an application of mentalism in practice. By changing one's thoughts, one can change emotional responses and behaviors, thereby transforming one's life circumstances. The mind becomes a tool of liberation or a prison, depending on how it is used. Social constructs further illustrate the power of mentalism. Money, for example, has no intrinsic value. It is a symbol, a shared belief, a mental agreement between people. Nations, laws, religions, and even time are constructs that exist because we collectively agree they do. The entire structure of society is built upon mental frameworks, ideas that we have agreed to believe in and act upon. This is perhaps the most powerful real-world application of the principle of mentalism. Our shared reality is fundamentally mental in nature. Change the belief, and the reality shifts. Those who understand this wield great power, whether they be spiritual leaders, marketers, politicians, or innovators. By influencing the minds of others, they reshape the world. Thus, mentalism is not an obscure mystical doctrine, it is the hidden engine behind cultural evolution and human history. The implications for personal development are profound. If everything begins in the mind, then mastery of one's thoughts becomes the highest form of power. This is not merely positive thinking or the superficial application of affirmations, it is the disciplined recognition that thought is causative. The mind is the first cause, the prime mover. This is why Hermeticism emphasizes mental transmutation, the art of changing one's mental states into higher forms. Anger can be transmuted into compassion, fear into courage, confusion into clarity. Through meditation, visualization, and self-inquiry, the practitioner of mentalism can begin to shift their internal reality and, by extension, their external circumstances. Mentalism invites us to become conscious creators rather than unconscious victims. Mentalism also calls into question the nature of identity and the self. If the universe is a mental construct, then so too is the self, a bundle of memories, beliefs, desires, and identifications. Who we are is a story we tell ourselves, a narrative constructed in the mind. Yet behind this story is the silent witness, the pure awareness that observes all mental activity. In Eastern traditions, this awareness is called the Atman, the Tao, or simply consciousness. In Hermeticism, it is the divine spark, the fragment of the all within each individual. The realization of this inner divinity is the goal of the Hermetic path. Mentalism thus serves as both a cosmology and a roadmap for spiritual awakening. The modern obsession with mental health reflects, albeit unconsciously, a deep yearning to reconcile with this principle. In a world filled with stress, distraction, and existential anxiety, the power of the mind to heal or harm is more apparent than ever. Depression, anxiety, addiction, these are not merely chemical imbalances, but also distortions in perception and belief. Healing, therefore, must involve a return to right thinking, to harmony with the deeper truth of one's being. Practices such as mindfulness, journaling, cognitive restructuring, and even psychedelic therapy all align with the Hermetic idea that transformation begins in the mind. To reclaim sovereignty over one's thoughts is to step into one's divine inheritance. In the age of the internet and digital media, the principle of mentalism takes on a new dimension. Social media platforms are vast arenas of mental projection, our profiles are curated avatars. Our feeds are dreamscapes of collective consciousness. Memes, trends, and viral content are modern-day sigils, symbols charged with mental energy that influence behavior and perception. The internet is not just a tool, it is a mirror of the mental plane, a reflection of our collective psyche. What we see online is not out there but in here, a feedback loop between the individual mind and the collective mind. The danger, of course, is the loss of mental sovereignty. When algorithms manipulate attention and hijack emotion, the mind becomes a battleground. In this context, the Hermetic imperative to master one's thoughts becomes a revolutionary act. Mentalism also offers a counterpoint to the nihilism and existential despair that often accompanies a purely materialistic worldview. If the universe is a dead machine, then life has no intrinsic meaning. But if the universe is a living mind, then meaning is not imposed but discovered. Every experience, every encounter, every challenge becomes a message from the deeper layers of reality, a chance to awaken. Synchronicities, those strange coincidences that feel charged with significance, are not accidents, but echoes of a mind-structured universe. The more one aligns with the principle of mentalism, the more life reveals itself as a coherent, intelligent pattern. One begins to live in dialogue with the cosmos, not in exile from it. Critics may argue that mentalism leads to solipsism, the idea that only one's own mind exists. But Hermeticism does not deny the reality of other minds. It suggests that all individual minds are expressions of a greater mind. Just as every wave is part of the same ocean, every being is a unique modulation of the universal consciousness. Compassion, therefore, is not an abstract moral ideal, but a recognition of shared essence. To harm another is to harm oneself. In a time of polarization and fragmentation, the principle of mentalism offers a unifying vision, one that transcends religion, nationality, and ideology. We are not separate beings fighting over scarce resources, we are thoughts in the same divine mind. The future may well depend on whether humanity embraces this deeper truth. As artificial intelligence grows more sophisticated, the boundary between mind and machine becomes ever more blurred. Will we create machines that simulate consciousness, or will we recognize consciousness as primary and machine as derivative? The principle of mentalism urges caution and clarity. It reminds us that intelligence is not the same as awareness, and that the sacred cannot be coded into existence. At the same time, it invites us to explore new frontiers of the mind, lucid dreaming, astral travel, psychical research, and other phenomena that defy reductionist explanations. What if the next great leap in human evolution is not technological but mental, a shift in consciousness rather than hardware? As the ancient Hermetic adage goes, as within so without, as above so below. This aphorism, closely related to mentalism, encapsulates the fractal nature of reality. The outer world reflects the inner world. Political unrest mirrors psychological discontent. Environmental degradation echoes spiritual disconnection. To change the world, we must first change ourselves, not in a moralistic sense, but in the deepest mental sense. Thought is the root. Action is the branch. Result is the fruit. The more we understand the mind as the architect of reality, the more intentional we can become in shaping the future. In the end, the principle of mentalism is not just a metaphysical curiosity or a relic of ancient wisdom. It is a living principle, as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. It challenges our assumptions, redefines our priorities, and invites us to take responsibility for the world we inhabit. To embrace mentalism is to reclaim the power of thought, not as fantasy, but as the most fundamental force in the universe. In a time of unprecedented change, it may be the most important truth we can remember: that everything begins in the mind, and that by changing our thoughts, we change everything.